Okay, wonderful. Well, it's 1 o'clock, so I will start. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. We have a number of people from different walks of life, some comedy writers, some filmmakers, some people that I do not know. I am Daniela Sioni. I'm just going to share a screen for the opening because some of you don't know me, so I'm going to set up the talk we're in today. And I'm so excited to give it to you because this is my favorite thing to teach. You guys are all seeing my slides. So the title of this talk is 5 Steps to Turning Your Life or Act into a Comedy TV Series, something I've been doing with people, for people since 2012. And today's talk is going to be 90 minutes. I'm going to give you a roadmap, starting with who the hell am I anyway, the course creation story for my program, the 5 steps, which you can totally use and take action on your own. And then next steps, if you do want to join any of my programs, I have a number of different solutions for writers, and a bonus offer if you are interested for the live attendees. And then we'll leave at least 20 minutes for live Q&A. So who the hell am I anyway? I'm Daniela Sioni. I'm a veteran film and TV script supervisor, which has actually nothing to do with writing. It's part of the filmmaking process. I work with directors. I'm known all over the world for this, and I specialize in comedy. I am a former stand-up comic. I am a comedy writer with many, many awards to my name. I am a teacher, and I love teaching, and I am a huge process nerd. And the confession I have for you today is that about 20 years ago, I spent $4,500 on a post-grad diploma in comedy writing that did not teach me anything, and certainly not a process, which is something that I love. All the courses that I teach offer a process. I train filmmakers on how to choose shots to make their movies. I train script supervisors on how to do our very complex job with the process. And I train comedy writers in both television and feature film. Today, we're going to focus on television. That was my seminal and most popular course. Everything I learned about comedy, I really did learn by doing stand-up. I was a stand-up for 8 years, and I ran a really popular room called West End Girls in Toronto. And the formula was 8 women and 1 token boy comic. This was from 2008 to 2016, at a time when female comics were really underrepresented. And we found our audience, and I loved doing that. But ultimately, I realized that comedy, especially in Canada, was kind of a dead end in terms of there's only so much you can earn. You can't really earn a living, and there's only so many. I mean, some of the women I have on this show, you'll see, like Sandra, of course. Sandra Shamus is a millionaire. She's one of the few women in Canadian comedy to make $1 million in comedy. Kate Davis makes a great living, but most of us who slog away in comedy rooms, it's kind of a dead end. So dying is easy, comedy is hard. I found out that quote was actually said by Edmund Gwenn. He was an Oscar winner. I believe he played Santa in Miracle on 34th Street. Anyway, comedy does not have to be that hard. I came to a conclusion in my years of doing stand-up, which followed my comedy degree, my comedy diploma, and I created a roadmap for myself that I then extended to comedians, and quickly after that, because it was my lay people, what I call my lay people, because comics were clergy, right? It's we were doing the Lord's work. But no, the regular people were the ones selling their scripts actually before comedians were, which kind of shocked me. But the process works whether you're a comic or not. This whole all these years of experience in the comedy rooms and in my failed attempt at finding a process in comedy school led me to create my flagship program. Hold on, I'm going to unshare screen and explain my program a bit because I have some stories to tell. How do I unshare my screen? I know I do this all the time, and it's just been a while. Okay, here we go. Stop share. Here we go. Okay, so from SCHTICK to Script was, I have braces, by the way. I'm so new to them, so sometimes you'll hear me lisp, and that is why. In 2012, I had a bit of an epiphany midway through my stand-up comedy career, that there were all these comics with these great voices and stories and developed material from their life, and they were earning like 20 bucks a gig, not really going anywhere with it. And I realized that they had no idea or even desire, many of them, to write for film or television, which is where you can actually make a living. Even in Canada, you can actually make a living with your comedic voice. And I have students all over the world now, but back then it was like really Toronto focused because I was teaching live and it was mostly comedians. And the program, so what happened to me in comedy writing school so many years ago, I wrote the first draft of my script. I brought it to my professor. He said, "Great, now make it funnier." And I said, "Well, how do I do that?" And he said, "Figure it out. Figure it out." I had spent thousands of dollars to go to comedy school. I had read tons and tons of books, of course. But here was my prof telling me to figure it out. So I did. So I did. I did come up with a process because, like I said, I'm a process nerd. I totally need a process. By the way, there's not just one process, right, to writing a comedy script. But the process that I discovered there, that I developed, that I shared with my students, the same process I use in my writing is the same process I teach. And sometimes I'll find students who need a different way, and I'll guide them. But it is. It has been largely successful, much to my own surprise, because, it was at first theoretical. I had the theory of my process down before I started writing in greater volume, which came in later years. And I realized how much it worked. It worked to the point where this year I have 7 laurels for one screenplay. Now that's my feature screenplay. In the past, I had 3 awards for my first out of school pilot. The pilot I wrote in school, I do not count that one because I had no idea what I was doing, and I also had no guidance. So, and all my film and TV scripts have been optioned. But the great thing that happened this year, and none of them have been made yet. I'm knock wood that maybe this recent one could be made. But my students have sold scripts that went into development. So my student, and many of them this year, I think 5 was my last count of awards my students have won this year in major comedy competitions. So I'm now competing in some of these same competitions against my own students. And I love that. That makes me so happy because we all sort of developed our voice. Well, they didn't, because some of these were their first scripts ever. Many of these are their second or third drafts, which is kind of unheard of. The one that I have that's going around the world right now that has the 7 laurels was my second draft. So the whole thing with the process I'm going to present you, and with which I go much deeper in my courses, of course, but it is designed to get you to eliminate too many rewrites, because of course writing is rewriting, and comedy writing especially eventually is punch up, right? But it makes me sad when people are rewriting and rewriting and rewriting endlessly without a specific aim, right? So every step of the process has a goal, and people can start to see for themselves what parts are working for them and be very clear on what they need to do next, just to save all that extra time. Okay, so I want to make sure I didn't. Yes. Okay. So let's get into it. I'm going to go back to my slides and I'll cut back in and out. It's a little bit awkward on Zoom, but I will try. So the 5 steps overall. So with any big goal, by the way, and I train business students as well and filmmakers with any big goal. And writing a TV pilot based on your life or your act is a big goal. It can be very overwhelming, but you can break down any big goal into very specific, actionable steps, save time, and have just a very clear focus, one step at a time, and it will get you there faster. So the 5 steps I'm going to go through today are finding your premise, doing your character work, deciding on your pilot story and structure, writing your pilot, and rewriting and punch up. And some of these steps might seem huge, but we do them in a very concentrated amount of time in my program. But I'll go through it because all of this you can certainly do on your own. Absolutely. So step 1, finding your premise. I'm going to unshare screen. That's a big one. That is a big one for a lot of people. It's a big stumbling block sometimes. For years, I'd hear people say, "Oh, I really want to take your course, but I don't have a premise." And I want to say, and I do say to them, "Well, part of my program, the first 4 hours of the 20 hours is all about premise." But I decided this year, and it worked out really well. It actually worked out really well. This year, I created a premise creation challenge, a comedy TV premise creation challenge that was separate from my course, that people could do before they take the course, that would help them find their premise before they even take the course. And some of them just did the challenge and didn't do the course because that was their big, that was the biggest pain point for them, is getting to that premise. And again, I break down, so I do have this 5-day personal TV comedy premise creation challenge. Sorry, I've changed the name slightly. I used to call it sitcom, but people got weirded out by the word sitcom. They thought that only meant live to tape, but in my brain, it means most definitely half-hour comedy as well. So anyway, we did it earlier this April. I have one coming up January 4th. It's pay what you want. I have a suggested price of $47 US, but it's pay what you want. People have paid zero, and I'm totally fine with that. I don't want anyone to not be able to access the challenge because it's so much fun. So it's a 5-day thing, and I won't go through the 5 things. I'll tell you more about it later, but that is usually the very first step, is finding your premise. Now, the thing about TV comedy premises that you should know while you're deciding on your premise. It might seem at first like finding a needle in a haystack. You cannot base your whole life, you cannot turn your whole life into a comedy. It just doesn't work that way, right? Same with if you were doing, like, even biopics picks certain elements, even like The Crown, they jump many, many years. I know that's not a comedy, but they jump many, many years, and they embellish the truth a little bit, right? For dramatic purposes. And comedy has an extra layer of difficulty put on top of that because you're looking for the comedic engine in your idea as well. So your life might feel so crazy that you have 5 stories in there, 5 different sitcoms, and you're probably right. You probably do. You're not alone in that. So some of you have said to me, I'm not a comedy writer. You've said, I'm not a comedy writer. I have no business writing a comedy show. That's another kind of thing I hear from students who hum and haw. And it's like, believe me, I'm not the world's funniest person either, but I am winning all kinds of awards for comedies. I was an okay stand-up. I wasn't a superstar. I was still really working in film full time, but comedy to some degree is a learnable skill. And what you will be most surprised to learn, people who aren't already comedy writers, is how much pain is involved. So the crazier your life is, the more painful it is, the more funny is probably living within you that is potentially untapped. Some of you have tapped into it with your stand-up or sketch writing or improv, because I get a lot of students from those worlds, of course. Writers put a lot of pressure on themselves looking for something never seen before on television, but you step over the obvious. There's comedy gold right in your own life. I had 2 students this year alone sell projects, and both of them, someone commented on my ad for this, oh, I've got a crazy family, there's probably a series in there. Yeah, both the people who sold scripts this year were based on their crazy families. One in Canada, she is a single mom in her 40s, and the other guy was from Canada, sold it to LA. He is in his 50s, a single Jewish dad with 3 kids. So both of their premises were very directly based on, and there were scripts they wrote in class, very directly based on their life. And that is what sold. In fact, the Jewish man that I'm talking about had actually more to his premise. He was trying to like zuzz it up like with all these other elements. And the producer who bought it said, I'm just interested in your family storyline. That is what I can sell. So don't doubt the power of your crazy life. Paul Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver, one of my writing partners, Annie Bradley, who is now the head of the DGC Ontario, but Annie took a writing course with Paul as part of TIFF Talent Lab, and he gave them all a speech about knowing your shit. He said, does everyone here know their shit? So what he meant is, do you know what the thing is that trips you up in life over and over again? Because if you have to know your shit as a writer, you have to know what your major character flaw is as a human being in order to write anything, because you're going to keep writing about it and over again for your whole life. So people started answering, oh yeah, I have abandonment issues. I have, daddy issues. I have just everything came out in the, and and then they reflected, a lot of the filmmakers in that group reflected on their life and realized, oh yeah, there is one thing I keep writing about over and over again, or I want to write about over and over again. And that is what's known as your shit. So part of my challenge does, if anyone is interested in doing it, does delve into getting into your own shit. It starts there. So I just want to warn anybody that that's because we have to start with our own personal pain. To get to the comedy faster, we have to know ourselves, and we have to we just have to be self-aware, so that we can draw not only characters like ourselves, but then start to observe the same things in other people. So, but what does a comedy, because Paul Schrader is not a comedy writer either, what does a comedy require specifically? So ultimately, it's, I don't want people to put pressure on themselves to write a log line at first. So I always tell my students to start with a premise statement, just a general sentence, but a sentence that evokes hundreds of different possible stories based on one or more characters. So it could be an ensemble piece. It could really be based around one character, each with an overarching major flaw that will not be easy for them to overcome. And the reason for that is that comedies, so you've got to tell these 100 stories, and the comedy engine of a, the thing that keeps the funny, where the source of the funny, the source of the laughter, and the source of all the stories is the character's major flaw and the relationships you've designed between that character and the other characters. It's very character driven. So yeah, we'll get into character next, but so the sentence that you come up with itself, that premise statement doesn't need to be funny on its own. People make the mistake of, well, people, they'll say that this is a hilarious romp. Like, don't tell people your idea is funny. Just say the idea of your premise. But it doesn't need to be funny on its own. It just needs to evoke the possibility of humor. And actually, before I continue into the 5 steps, I should say that one of the golden rules I have very few rules. I have like 100 tools and very few rules. But please don't try to be funny at first. With comedy writing, if you try to be funny, that's the fastest way to bombing. And I learned that in comedy rooms too. You want to be truthful. You want to be truthful because you start with the truth, and then you build on that. The very last stage, as you saw in these 5 steps, is punch up. You also want to create the conditions for humor to happen. And that happens in the way you set up your world and design your characters and create the character relationships. That's really the most of the heavy lifting. And then you become good at writing dialogue and all of the steps afterwards. But basically you engineer the possibility for humor to happen, but you don't try to be funny at first, for real. And I always ask people to trust me on that, because it's very hard sometimes when people are used to, someone told me they're the master of dad jokes. So if you're always trying to make jokes, and that is, by the way, a very, very interesting defense mechanism we have as humans. I know, because I've had that, deflecting pain with humor. And what's underneath the dad jokes? And all of that, right? So start with the truth, and then you build on top of that to get to the funny. Okay. Yes, and improvisers know this. Anyone who's trained at Second City or Improv Olympics or in the Groundlings, everything is grounded in truth, in some very simple realities. Start with the simple truth and work up from there. A lot of improvisers do really well in my class too. Another way to think about comedy TV series premise that is pretty important, whether you're doing live to tape or whether you're doing, and live to tape is like live in front of a studio audience, or single camera, which is never single camera anymore. We shoot live on location. But so, live to tape is like Friends or like Two Broke Girls. More common single camera, especially in Canada, where many of you are here from, is like Fleabag, Sex and the City, Russian Doll, all these things, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Either way, you can't have endless locations, right? Because of the realities, the budgetary limits of creating comedy television series. So you end up needing to limit the number of locations you have, especially if you're doing live to tape. They literally usually only have 3 stages and a swing stage or 2, right? So what you end up doing is having to set up a very specific world, a place for your comedy. I read a great description of what makes for a comedy series premise: disparate characters forced to be together in a common space. So that's why we get a lot of workplace comedies, like Cheers, The IT Crowd, Taxi, all the great ones. There's tons and tons of endless great workplace comedies, family comedies, Modern Family, Married with Children, families of choice like Golden Girls, New Girl, etc., where people are different, the characters are different and challenge and support each other in all different ways, the way that the characters are engineered, but they are forced to share a common space. And if your characters are not forced to share this space, then you may not have a show, because if they can walk away at any time, we have to ask, why do they stay if things are so tough? Because you're going to put your characters through the ringer. That's what comedy is, right? Comedy is a lot of pain and it's cruelty, according to some people. So why wouldn't they walk away? By the way, so I always ask my students to tap into the worlds that they've walked in. Here's a story about a show I worked on called Suits. I was a script supervisor for the first 4 seasons. And here is, you may or may not know this story, the creator of Suits, Aaron Korsh, came from the financial world. He came from stock brokerages and all of that. That's a world he knew best. So originally, Suits was set in that world. He went to go pitch it. So he created all of those characters, Harvey, Donna, everybody was all based on his life in that world. He went to pitch it to NBC Universal, and they said, "Oh, that's great, but we're looking for legal dramedies, because it's a dramedy, 1 hour dramedy." And he said, "Oh yeah, I can do that." So he told me that he binge watched LA Law. He binge watched all these great legal shows from over the years, and he knew nothing about law, and he just reset everything he had developed into a law office. And if you watch Suits, there's very little law in it, right? It's more about deal making, the way that deal making, double crossing, loyalties, all of that he had in his original premise. So sometimes you start with a world and you know it so well that you can easily extrapolate it to another world if the situation demands. What a lucky break. He got picked up right away as a new showrunner. He had worked as a staff writer on Everybody Loves Raymond, which was a half hour, very different from a full 1 hour show. In Canada, we pigeonhole our writers, meaning like if you write half hours, you write half hours, and if you write 1 hour, so they gave a half hour staff writer a 1 hour show to show run. You are going to have, I'm frozen. Okay. Tell me when I'm back. I got the message that I froze. Am I back? Oh, yay, I'm back. Okay, so what line did I freeze on? I think I told you about Aaron and how pigeonhole. Okay, so yes, Canadian, maybe the comedy gods of Canada didn't like me saying this about the Canadian industry, but in Canada, writers get pigeonholed into either half hour comedy or 1 hour drama, or dramedy even. We don't do as many dramedies as they do in the States. But anyway, we get pigeonholed one or the other. So here was Aaron Korsh, a staff writer on a very successful half hour show, being given a show running position on a 1 hour dramedy because he was attached to it. And so the reason that I stress the personal sitcom premise, TV comedy premise creation challenge, the reason I stress the word personal in that challenge is because when you write from your life, not only is it going to be a script that you care about more and you will get to the finish line of writing it much faster, but when you go to sell it, if it is your life, you are going to stay on as a writer. In both the cases of my students this year, first-time writers, a personal story, they're staying on as writers. I still don't know their final deals if they get to, be showrunners, but at least they get to stay on as writers so far. But personal, and it's just people all over the world, but especially in the US and also sometimes in Canada, are looking for authenticity. So authenticity, whether it's comedy or drama, it is also a huge selling point. So now I'm talking more about real people, real people. How about comedians? We're not real people. So how about if you're a comic listening to me talk about this? Because originally the course was specifically designed for comics, and then I had a lot of non-comics taking it, which is totally fine. And I found it was working for them even better. But if you are a comic, you know your act, you have an act, you have an established routine, you have an established character maybe. So how do you turn that into a into a comedy TV series? And there's many different ways comics have done so. I show in our first 4 hours of the class, I show all different examples of comics who have gone directly from the stage to the TV screen in all different ways. But here are all the reasons why at a certain stage in your career as a stand-up comic, someone at Just for Laughs or somewhere else is going to say, hey, do you have any sitcoms we can look at? By the way, this year, I don't know if any of you applied for Sundance, in the comedy category, they were just combing the streets looking for a feature written by a comic. Now I had one. I mean, I'm not a comic anymore, but it wasn't like it wasn't, I wrote it for a director. Anyway, they weren't interested in that one. They're like, do you have anything else based on your act? And I didn't. So it's always good just to really think ahead if you're a comic and what could you write based on your act. So comedians have a voice. They have a unique voice already. That's the harder part to develop for new writers, and comics have that naturally. Sometimes one joke is a premise. That's hard because that joke really has to evoke 100 stories. I have one, but it's like a B-level joke. It was never one of my, oh, my mic is falling. It was never one of my, killer jokes, but it had it's the one I'm going to, God, it's been so long since I've done stand-up. I haven't done stand-up since 2016. So let me see if I can remember the joke. Oh my God. Jesus, I don't think I can remember the joke. It's called Labor Camp. I like to date a lot of different people, but all my relationships go something like this. A person, guy goes out with me, treats me like crap, dumps me, goes through rehab, and spends the rest of his life trying to make it up to me. So there's always someone I can call to fix my computer, shovel my driveway, or help me move. I'm not so much dating as building a labor camp. I can't wait to retire. So that's like not a great joke. It doesn't get huge laughs. It never got huge laughs in the clubs, but that is the premise for my next script, because this may be TMI, but I'm also polyamorous. So I have multiple relationships at the same time. So I'm going to be writing about that, but also like, there's just so many people I've dated. It's kind of a joke, right? And like my mom as an aging woman coming to terms with that. So you might have a joke like that in your repertoire, or if you're a sketch writer, a sketch you've written. It's really, really hard to expand sketch into a TV series or movie. You have to add other layers and you have to do more character work, but you might have a sketch that you've written or a joke like that where you can see 100 stories coming out of it. Sometimes in your comedy, you have characters that you've created. Welcome Back, Kotter was directly from Gabe Kaplan's stand-up act. All those characters were directly in his act, and those were jokes that were killing. And so he turned them into the TV series that we all remember. Well, maybe not all of you. I'm a bit old, from the 70s. So some people, by the way, start with step 2, which is the character work, right? So step 1 is finding your premise. You can absolutely start with step 2, which is doing your character work, because you would probably start with your own character, whether it's a character that you do on stage or a character you've created in a sketch, in a show. Like 40-Year-Old Virgin came out of a sketch, right? I talk about that in my feature writing class, but he really developed that from one sketch, and pitched it from that sketch as well. Sorry. Yes. So sometimes that character inspires everything else. And so sometimes you do start with the character work. We'll get into character work a little bit more in a sec. I co-wrote and you just ask a lot of what ifs with that character. I co-wrote what I think is a really funny sitcom with Annie Bradley a few years ago called Irreverent. And we wrote it for Nikki Payne, who is a pretty great Canadian comic from the East Coast. And Nikki's got this onstage persona. I'm doing a bad Nikki impression, but she's got a cleft palate and she lisps and she's like a killer. She's really wild on stage and raunchy and rowdy. And in life, she's like a real sweetheart with like a great work ethic and just so kind and loving to people. And we thought, what if Nikki Payne was her onstage persona in real life? So that was the first part of our what if question. And then we asked another what if question. What if she could no longer do stand-up comedy? So we put that character through hell and created this I'm pretty proud of that pilot. So, okay, so I do have, I just want to, I think I've said enough about it, but I am going to show you the 5-day premise creation challenge. I'm going to talk more about it at the end, but it really is the thing that addresses this, this pain point of trying to figure out what your premise can be. By the way, people come up with more than one. I'll explain how the challenge works, because the winner gets like a free spot in my class. Like it's all pretty, it's a pretty fun process. You might go through all the exercises in the challenge, by the way, and realize that you don't have a TV series premise at all, that you have a movie. And the difference between those two things is that TV characters really do not change. They change very, very slowly, very incrementally over seasons. Whereas in movies, there is a definite character transformation. So I do have a different challenge for that I'm going to do in February, and I'm going to, because I do have a course called Make 'em Laugh for 90 minutes, which really gets into comedy feature filmmaking from both the writer and director perspective, because I've been so privileged to walk in some very high-end worlds in Hollywood, also from the director perspective. But that's been a really super successful program for my students in terms of for some reason, it seems to be easier for them to write strong first drafts of features than TV series. Like I really noticed like the insane level of quality in that class. Anyway, character work. Step 2, doing your character work. So I'm also a, oh, I skipped ahead. I was trying to do this. I'm also a story editor, and I get a lot of scripts brought to me by clients. And when they're not my students, it never ceases to amaze me. Not all the time, but I would say the vast majority of the time, I can really tell that they've never done any kind of character work. It's really, really evident when you read a script and there's things like, you don't understand why characters are doing things, they're behaving inconsistently, they're just not interesting enough, there's no clear flaw, there's no, it's amazing how, now I say, you know, and these are grown adults with who maybe have done a lot of writing. Some of them maybe have written novels and they're switching over to features or TV series. And I notice, and I'll ask them, where did you learn to do character work? And they will say, what do you mean by that? In the 5 steps, I would say the character work is something you want to concentrate on the most, because in television, your characters are your comedy engine and the relationships between them. And if you don't have a compelling, well drawn out character, people are not going to, they're just not going to tune in to the show just based on a concept, right? You can get away with a high concept sometimes in television because it's 90 minutes and bye-bye. But on a TV series, for people to invest time coming back week after week, they really have to be into your characters. It doesn't mean they have to love them. They can hate them, but they have to understand them, and they have to, you know, hate or love them or empathize with them. But they have to be clearly drawn first in order to be able to do that. Now, that's a huge pain point for some people. The next 4 hours of my 20-hour class is all about doing the character work. Now, my favorite screenwriting teachers, because they're not necessarily comedy writing teachers, have been Julie Gray. So if anyone's familiar with her work, she does a lot of great stuff with character work. It's sort of, many of you might be more familiar with Lajos Egri, who wrote The Art of Dramatic Writing back in the 40s. She sort of did an updated version of that kind of character work. Lajos Egri's book was a classic for Hollywood screenwriters back then, and also playwrights. She did a really fun update. I really love her work. Of course, Corey Mandel, great teacher. He approaches character work in a different way that I do drawing. And of course, Jen Grisanti. I've done a little bit with Jen Grisanti. And it's funny because I really developed my whole system before I found her work. And she also gets people to tap into their own lives. So it is a really powerful, it is just a really, really powerful thing to do. It's you've got this fountain, this wealth inside you of comedy gold. Now, Jen is not comedic, but you know, it absolutely works. Her process also works for comedy and drama, of course. She's got a lot of amazing, successful students, of course. So yeah, I draw upon all those things to create the process of character work. We go really, what I love about Julie, I love Julie's character interview worksheet, but we really work hard to define our main character's want, need, flaw, and symptoms of the flaw, because they're going to help you answer anything. When you get down to doing your scene work and even your dialogue work, knowing each of your characters' want, need, flaw, symptoms of the flaw. So the want is the outward thing they need, and that might change from episode to episode. They might have a long-term overarching goal, but every episode they'll have a want. Their need is the thing they don't know they need. It is the underlying, what their therapist would tell them they need in order to be happy. And of course, your comedy characters, you're never going to give them happiness until you're in season 10 and you want the show to end, right? So the need is the thing that never truly gets fulfilled. The flaw is the thing that is tripping your character up from achieving their want and need every single time. So the flaw has got to be something primal and powerful. And it is the key to comedy is the flaw, right? Jen, I noticed she has a new course on the wound, and that's sort of how Corey Mandel explains it too. Like the flaw emanates from this wound your character has experienced quite early in life. It dictates everything. Just like in life, psychologists will tell you that we're formed by age 5. And so if we had a trauma, and even if we didn't have a trauma, we've had experiences up to age 5 that shape the way we are for the rest of our lives. Sometimes those things happen for people later in life, but most of us, it's a childhood thing. That sort of starts to form the flaw within us as human beings. So that's where I get my comedy students to start. My comedy is with our own core wound, major flaw, the thing that has become our major flaw. It's funny, all my favorite writing teachers go there and they're not even talking about comedy. It's like 2 to 3 times more important in comedy. If you scratch a comic, you'll any comic, you'll find a lot of pain, right? And there's really good reason for that. Comedy is the best coping mechanism, not only for them, but also for the audience. I read a really cool thing about Steve Colbert because I'm like, oh, that guy has no pain whatsoever, right? That guy has no pain. When he was 10, he lost his parents in a tragic car accident, you guys. So I had no idea. So he seems like a mild-mannered, that is a huge tragedy in his life. So, I mean, as human beings, this is the good news for us as human beings, is that we all go through, life is hard. Dying is hard. Dying is easy. Comedy is hard, right? No, but we all have these events in our life and we can use them for material. That is what the comedian knows as a secret. Once you land on the strongest possible want, need, flaw, symptoms of the flaw, by the way, are the outward manifestations of the flaw. So if their flaw is that they reject authority, right? They're completely rebellious. By the way, you want to go as primal as possible with this flaw because it's got to fuel 100 stories. So it's not, someone who swears a lot, that's a symptom of a flaw. That's not like why. You keep asking why. Why do they swear a lot? Because they hate authority, because they can't, they're extremely rebellious. I mean, there might even be something underneath that. Why are they extremely rebellious? Severe daddy issues. I don't know. There's so many ways. There are so many things that you could come to the conclusion of, right? And it's fun. Like to me, when I teach this part, people tell me how much fun they have because it gets you to. It's really your mind starts rolling. You're just trying to come up with want, need, flaw. You're not trying to make the greatest character in the world. You're just trying to create a character that's real, and it starts to become, he or she starts to become, or they, really, really real to you. And it becomes a really fun process. Now, once you design your main character or the characters all around them, you then start to create the characters all around them. Same thing, want, need, flaw, symptoms of the flaw, interview your characters, get to know them, start to hear their voices. Sometimes that happens. But comedy, I think we've said this already, has been described by the Greeks as the unity of opposites. So you definitely want to have at least one character who's completely opposite to your character. That's constantly going to be a source of problems for them. Conflict. I know people, it's true, comedy is conflict, but it's sometimes I remember that show, Mama's Family in the 70s, the Carol Burnett one, and it used to make me crazy that they were always screaming at each other. That's not what I mean by conflict. I just mean, there's constantly someone getting in the way of your character's goal, or someone that has the opposite core makeup of your character, the want, need, flaw, they're in direct opposition. So it's always creating the opportunity for humor, unity of opposites by pitting those two together. And, there's different shades of that. You can have one character be completely different in one way, be completely the same in another way, but have another aspect to their character that makes your character see themselves in a way that they don't like. How, you start to engineer, you start to ask yourself, who can I populate? I've got this idea for a premise, maybe a world within my premise. It's a workplace comedy, or in my case, it's my poly comedy. I'm going to move my elderly Italian mom into my house because she's approaching 80. So that goes into my show. She's very hilarious, but she's also very old school. Like, she doesn't understand. One of my long-term exes transitioned to female. So one of my best friends now is my trans ex-girlfriend, and my mom is just coming to terms with that. I think it's so funny. And my ex has also given me great permission to use that story. But I can start to see, because I know the conflict, you'll have recurring lines of conflict in your own life that you'll start to recognize. My sister and I are complete opposites. You can name the line of conflict in your life. So with me and my sister, I call it the war of stupid. She thinks I'm really stupid because I've never had kids and I don't know how to drive. And I think she's really stupid because she is. Like, she's literally stupid. She's so smart about money because she really values money, but she's horrible about like facts. Like, she had no idea that Manhattan was an island, and she didn't believe me. And she was like screaming at me about it, and she was on the phone with me going, I know Manhattan's not an island because my friend drove there. And I was like, yeah, have you ever heard of bridges and tunnels? Sorry, I screwed up the joke, but it's like that. It was a real conversation that I had turned into a joke. It's always the war of stupid, and she always somehow wins, even though my IQ is probably literally double than her. She's a Trump supporter. For real. And an anti-vaxxer. Sorry, like, she just doesn't believe COVID is a thing, and I had a cousin die from it. So that is my ongoing war of stupid with my sister. So that is a clear conflict in my own life that I could draw upon when I create my characters, if I wanted to put the sister character in there. I loathe her so much but it is really funny. Like, so much material came out of that in my act. And then she got mad and deleted me as a Facebook friend. Okay, so the third step is decide where to start your story. So the next thing you're gonna have to do is figure out what your pilot is gonna be to introduce this series to the world. Sorry, time check. I think I'm okay. Yes, think I'm okay for time. So you want to decide. So there's three different kinds of pilots you might write. So you're going to decide if you're going to do a premise pilot, or an episodic pilot, or a hybrid. So what those mean in industry parlance, a premise pilot is like the origin story of your show. So Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt starts with her in the bunker getting rescued, and then her landing in New York City. That's a premise pilot. Whitney, I use that example because we use it in class. Whitney was a stand-up comic who had a series, and we just dive right into her life. We literally land into a day in her life with her boyfriend. That's an episodic pilot. So the audience catches up to their world, whereas in a premise pilot, we're experiencing the new world right along with them. A hybrid is when you combine the two. So when we land in 30 Rock, it's not Tina Fey's first day on the job. It is, however, the day that Alec Baldwin replaces her boss and tries to turn her whole show around. So it's not quite a premise pilot, but it's not episodic either. It is a significant inciting incident for the whole. Like, if you write feature films and you know about inciting incident, it's a significant inciting incident. So I call that a hybrid, and hybrids are actually really popular these days for a pilot story. I still love a good premise pilot, but the thing about your pilot story, whatever you land on for your pilot story, it's the promise to your audience of what your show is going to be every single week. So it can't be wildly different from all your other episodes, right? So it's got to be structurally the same. So you got to decide on a structure, and there's certain industry standards. For me, the most common industry standard in the United States, which is what I go by. I was really shocked to learn that in Canada, we're still doing 2-act sitcoms, which means a teaser, 2 acts, and a tag. Really shocking to me, because in the States that really ended in the 90s. We do in the States right now, they do 3 teaser, 3 acts, and a tag, and some shows even do 4 acts. So we're a little bit behind up here. But obviously if you're writing a spec like of an existing show, you want to find out what structure they're doing and you match to it. But when you're creating your own show, you get to decide. However, you want to make it industry standard. You want to make it a sellable format. You can, by all means, invent your own, but people want to know that you understand. If you're going to use your script as a writing sample, which many of my students do, they use it as a writing sample to get an agent or to enter contests. People want to see that you understand what industry standard is, right? So you decide on it. So the vast majority of my students do go with a teaser, 3 acts, and a tag. And I go a lot deeper into that in the class. We compare, I break down different sitcoms and show the act by act, like how they do it. Sorry, I see that I'm going to look at the questions at the end. I just see that there's a lot. I just want to make sure I don't miss, like if I freeze or anything like that. I'm trying not to. I've been accused in my classes of distracting myself with the chat when Zoom became a thing this year and we taught online. Anyways, it's not letting me scroll down. Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm back. Pigeonhole. Okay, these are amazing premises. Oh, okay, I'll talk about that at the end. Well, you know what? I'll talk about that right now. What's a tag? So in comedy, you know, in drama, we have cold opens where we cut right into a crime scene or whatever, right? In comedy, it's a teaser and it's like a little slice of life moment, sort of showing your character being who they are, right? You set up who your character is in that pilot. You really have to come on strong, even in that tag, even in that slice of life moment that sets up the episode. It sort of sets up what your episode is going to be about in a light way. So in 30 Rock, it's her going to the hot dog stand, if you guys remember, and there's this big line and this guy tries to bud the line and she buys all the hot dogs for all the good people who waited in line. So it shows us she's a rule follower, she's a pleaser. It shows us so much about Tina Fey's character and that she can't stand people who break rules, etc. Right? So it's already setting up like what kind of boss she's going to have in Alec Baldwin, him being the opposite of her. So that's a teaser. It's usually 1 to 2 pages. It's really short, 1 to 2 to 3, maybe 3 pages at the most, depending on how fast it plays. And it just sets up what your show is going to be about. It really sets up your character. Each act builds, so you heighten your story as each act progresses. The end of an act is typically cut to a commercial, but of course we have streaming services now with no commercials. But as writers, we still write to those act breaks. And what I mean by writing to those act breaks is we're escalating our story, which means in comedy, we're getting our character into deeper and deeper shit as the story progresses. And it's always like coming to a little bit of a cliffhanger or a climax with each act break, right? And when in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, we had only 2 of those points, and now we have 3. So we have 3 act enders that we're writing to. So that was funny. I went into my ring light and I shadowed myself. So as writers, even if you're writing for a network that doesn't have commercials, you're still sort of writing to those act breaks in your mind a bit. So in terms of structuring your story, we get a lot more into escalation and story structure in the class, but you got to know that if you're writing on your own. And a tag is when the story is over, the story's been resolved. In sitcom, the story, the character never changes. So whatever happens in the story, whether they win or lose, whether something magnanimous, something huge happens, they end up the way they started, so that people, otherwise your show is over. People have no reason to tune in next week. We're going to want to see them with their same character foibles week after week after week. The tag is sort of the breathing out after your story is told, after the end. It's usually a joke. So it's like a 1 to 2 minute scene. And it's like I was trying to think of, in the pilot of Modern Family, he's playing basketball with his son in the back, and then he's beating his son. Phil Dunphy is like beating his son, and he just can't be gracious about it. So it's like a sketch. In a way, it's like a simple sketch that shows, okay, the world is back to normal. We are the same people we were when we started the pilot. So at this point, I would train my students. Some of you already know your process. Some of my students sort of discover their process, whether it's beat sheeting, whether it's using index cards, it's like 1 card per scene, whether it's creating an outline or a fully fleshed out treatment. All of those things, we go through them in class, and people try what works for them. But basically, you do also want to spend a certain amount of time fleshing out your story. Oh, I never said this, but in the character work part, when I was researching the creation of the show Modern Family, the creators said they spent 2 months doing the character work. So my students don't normally spend 2 months doing the character work. These guys were, of course, paid for development that whole time. They had pitched their premise, but they really, really spent a lot of time. And look how many seasons that show has gone and how interesting those characters are. And then they amended them, by the way, in the casting process. Because Sofia Vergara's character was originally going to be African American, and through the casting process, because they found her, then they started to change the character to a Latina woman, and all the things that came with that, creating the dialogue and all of that stuff. So so you think about the best way into your story. A very common way in is usually someone's first day at work. The person who sold her first, in my very first year teaching this, says that I froze. Am I back? Okay, am I back? So I was saying the very first time I taught this class in 2012, one of my students sold her pilot, went into development with CTV right out of the class, because we had we're still trying to do this, by the way, but we have to wait till COVID is over. We have live readings of the best 3 scripts, and industry showed up and bought her script. So hers was a workplace comedy, and she went with, it was her first script ever, so she went with how this character experiences her new job, first day at work. Very, very easy way in, and very done a lot, but it works. Hey, so that's one way to think about structuring the story of your pilot. She just wanted to learn the craft, and then she just happened to sell it. It was a very, very, very solid idea. The show never it was in development for 3 years. It never got made, but she now works in writing rooms all over the country. She's amazing. So you just never know what's going to happen when you write your script, right? That's the beauty and the joy of comedy and of writing. Okay. So yeah, one way to get really good at structure is to break down and analyze shows that you love. So if you don't know what way to go with your structure, that's a really, I train my students how to do that. Cause I'm all about process. I'm such a process nerd. Okay. So step 4, we're 10 to 2, we're doing well. Step 4 is you write your script. So you actually sit down and write your script. There's a little thing I do before I write my script, actually, and I have a little video about it on the registration page for From SCHTICK to Script. It's a 2-minute video on creating verbal rules. I think I call it a character manifesto, a dialogue manifesto for each character. It was one of my favorites, and I can't remember which book it was from. I think it was from Alejandra Pilaro's book, The 10-Minute Coffee. The Coffee Break Screenwriter. I think it's her tool, but it's one I use all the time on how to, before you even write, because one of the biggest problems that I can see, and that contests can see, and that agents can see in a first-time screenwriter, is that the character voices are not differentiated. The writer writes them like the way they speak. Imagine if I wrote every character the way I speak. I speak really quickly. I speak elliptically. I come back to topics. I interrupt myself. That would be annoying if every character spoke like me. The most common thing I see is people trying to write dialogue in complete sentences. Most people do not speak like that. Even on The Crown, where they all speak the Queen's English, there are still character distinctions between the way the characters speak. I love that show. Sorry, I keep bringing it up, even though it's not a comedy. It's a comedy to me sometimes. But it's, yeah, so I do these verbal rules for all my characters. So that, for me, that's the first stage before I start actually writing my pilot. Because I've taken the time to structure my story, by this point, it actually comes really easy. I've got the roadmap for my story, and you might really adhere to your outline or your index cards, but I really want you to leave some room for discoveries along the way, because you're going to find as you're writing, I thought of something even better. And you want to like make sure you have the big picture in mind of like where the story is going and where the escalations are going, and then be able to adapt here and there along the way. And I know I do have some students who are anti-plotting out their story. They're really, really stubbornly are like, no, I got to write the script first. It just means more rewrites. That's all it means. Until you get inherently strong at storytelling structure for television, it just means more rewrites. Crown. Oh, Ada works on The Crown. She's here. Woohoo! Crown shout out. Yes, it is. It's one of my favorite shows. So you've already figured out the structure. You've solved your story. So right now you're just all about the fun of writing the scenes, and it is fun at this point. If you have done this step by step, it actually is super fun. We have is it week 3? Week 3 is story structure. Week 4 of the program is comedic scene structures. There's a whole bunch of classic comedic scene structures that you can draw upon that all my sketch writers do know about because we study them at Second City and other places. So I do teach a lot of those, but you can also, scenes have a beginning, middle, and end, and they escalate. And if a scene starts and ends with the character in the same emotional state of mind, the scene has not done its job, because every scene is a unit of dramatic escalation, and it should propel your character into, it should force them to make a new choice by the end of the scene, or just at least put them in a different state of mind, right? So that the story moves forward in a fun and funny way. With comedy, you just want to go as far as you can, depending on the tone of your show. There's different tonal qualities of comedy that you will decide on, and how far you go and the kinds of trouble you put them in will depend on that. So at this point, it's 100% fun, just writing the scenes. And you've done a lot of the heavy lifting. Really, the heaviest lifting is the character work. And then the structural heavy lifting is pretty heavy as well. So what is left? If you've written your script, what is left? Because you've written a first draft, which is industry parlance is vomit draft, vomit pass, which sounds horrible, but the idea is you just puke it up. You've got everything decided upon, probably, if you've gone through this methodology, and you just write it and get it done by a certain deadline. So I'll explain the process in my class, but that vomit pass is probably going to be horrible. It's amazing to me when it's not horrible, actually. My feature film writers blew me away with their their so-called vomit passes this year, their first feature scripts, and they were actually very, very readable. So it's harder with TV because there's so many things you're balancing. You're balancing your structure. Is this the right pilot story? Are these characters strong enough? It's more of a juggling act, television. It's shorter, of course, it's a shorter length, but there's much more involved in many ways. So what is that fifth step? Oh, sorry, I realized I haven't been sharing my screen and I skipped. Oh, here we go. So we were on character work last time I shared. Then decide on your pilot story and structure. Write that first draft of your pilot, and then rewrite and punch up. Rewriting and punch up is fun. By the time you're rewriting makes it so much easier because you've got it now on the page. It's you give it to some trusted sources. In our classes, we have our peers who've all been working under the same paradigm. So we have a Facebook group for our class where people get feedback from their peers. And the ones especially who do writer's room with me, which is another step in the process, they get really good at giving feedback because they're also learning how to be in a writer's room. And so and also you can get coverage in Hollywood. A lot of people say don't get coverage too early. One of my students from the feature film premise creation challenge in September wrote a killer concept. It was so good. She wasn't the winner, but she was one of the runners up. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to give myself the challenge of writing the script in 2 weeks. And she did. And she boldly gave that first vomit pass to LA for coverage. Thankfully, she got a 93%, but it can apparently bite you in the bum if you get some bad coverage in LA. So she said, I knew it was crazy, but I just needed fast feedback. She's, I don't know if she's here. She's trying to get her US visa. So she needs to sell a script as soon as possible. So she's highly motivated to finish her script. So that's been working out really well for her. Now it's in the hands of a studio, her second pass on it. But anyway, rewriting is so much fun because you get some trusted opinions, you maybe get some coverage, maybe you don't want too many people to read your vomit pass, right? You want it probably to be fellow writers. You probably want 1 or 2 people who aren't writers who are interested in reading your script. There's not going to be a lot of people lining up to read your script, by the way. It's so amazing how random strangers will email me at least once a day. Will you read my script? No, I do this for a living. But it's funny. It's really funny when people assume that people are just dying to read your script. And usually when it's someone brand new, it can be very painful. With my students, it's not, because we've gone through all this preliminary work. So it's always a joy at that point to read their scripts. But, I charge my story editing clients a premium for a reason, because it's hard work doing that heavy lifting from vomit pass to rewrite. But hey, it's so much easier if the script is there, if the actual script is written. You can then get to pick out any structural weaknesses, look for any character inconsistencies. I have a talk I do called How to Prepare Your Script for Punch Up. If anyone wants it, just email me. It's like a 45-minute talk. That I go through like everything that you want to look for when you're aiming to do your rewrite. And I did that talk kind of as a public service announcement because I'm a punch up artist, which means I'm a comaturge. I add the funny, I add the, I punch up, I do the last layer of, we don't get any credit, by the way. Punch up artists get paid a flat fee and we make scripts funnier, add jokes. There might be one punch up artist, there might be a whole group of us working on a script, but it's one of the things I do. And it always amazes me if someone says, yeah, I'd love for you to punch up my script, and they think it's punch up ready. A script is not punch up ready until it's ready. So punch up is the last stage. Punch up in comedy writing that's when you're trying to make it funny. At that point is when you're trying to make it funny. And yes, you can do it on your own or you can hire punch up artists. That's a secret that people really don't know. In television writing rooms, there's people who are strong at structuring and creating stories. There's people who are strong at writing dialogue. There's people who are strong at the jokes. And in a TV writer's room in Canada, our rooms are very small. There's usually about 6 people in a writer's room, and we don't work as collectively as they do in the United States. And in the States, writers' rooms are like 12 to 20 people. I've heard crazy stories about Chuck Lorre rooms with 40 people in 2 shifts of 20, at a time. So, and the work does get subdivided, and you are benefiting from the collective brain. What we don't realize that writing a pilot on your own is a lot of work because we don't necessarily have that. In my writer's room class, we do have the collective brain. There's no more than 8 people allowed in that class, but we do use that power. So yeah, don't bring a public service announcement. Don't bring a script to a punch-up artist until it's ready, meaning till all the other elements have been solved, the characters, the structure. I do some degree of dialogue rewrites that are not necessarily jokes at the punch-up stage, but you want at least your dialogue, verbal rules, or a basic understanding of how your character's speech done by that point. Okay, so those are the 5 steps. What I want to tell you about is how all my programs can solve them for you. If you're interested, you do not have to, of course, listen for this part, but if you stay for the end, I have a sweet deal for you guys. Only the people who attended live, because a bunch of people are going to watch this in replay, and that's totally fine, but they're not going to have access to the deal. And after I tell you about my programs, this should only take me 10 minutes, then we'll get into Q&A. Ask me anything for 20 minutes, either about anything, comedy writing, heckle me, whatever you want, or my programs in general. So I'm going to share screen again. I want to make sure I didn't leave anything out. So yeah, the first thing is my 5-day personal TV comedy series premise creation challenge. It is happening January 4th to 9th. It's pay what you want, which means $0 to whatever you want. My suggested price is $47 US. I think it's well worth that for the problem it solves, but I understand it's COVID and a lot of people don't have a lot of money. So people have paid me 0, people have paid me 47. It's all good with me. The whole goal, it's every single day I give you a 30-minute exercise, warning that the very first day is a bit painful because it has to be to get you to the funny faster. So that's just a caveat. In the first time we did the challenge, we had 78 writers in 3 countries at the time. Right now I've got 15 writers in 4 countries. It's probably going to get up to about 80 to 100 people. That's because that's what it usually does. It did that for my feature film challenge as well. Basically, every day for the 5 days, I give you a half-hour exercise to do. And by the Friday, January 8th, the idea is that you will have at least one, if not more, personal comedy premises for a TV series based on your life or act. People do come up with more than one. On the Saturday, I'm going to do a Zoom call. They usually run about 2 hours, depending on how many people want to present. And I say present and not pitch because I don't want anyone to think of it as a pitch at this point. You're not selling a show. You're just presenting the premise that is personal to you. So it's very low stress. By that point, people will tell me who wants to present. Some people won't want to present. Some people will just want to watch. And as long as they're registered in the challenge, that's totally fine. Then we're going to subdivide the time equally. So everyone gets equal time, whether they're presenting one premise or five. So you just got to know that everyone will get equal time. It's usually 2 to 5 minutes. I can't remember if it went up to 5 minutes for the feature film one, but the TV one was something like 2 minutes. Anyway, by the end of that, I will declare a winner, and the winner gets a free spot in my From SCHTICK to Script program. Okay, so this is, I'll email everyone these links, of course, but this is where you would register for my personal TV premise challenge. It is pay what you want. I love that at least 40% of people did pay the suggested price, but I do understand that not everybody is flush with cash at this point. So I know it's a very long link. I'm going to keep it up there for a second, but I'll also email it to you guys. I'm starting, so we have a private Facebook group for the challenge, and every day that Facebook group will open on January 1st. And then we do the challenge from the 4th to the 8th, and then the 9th is our presentation day. That will help many of you. That's all you will need. You'll just need to get to your premise, and then you'll be able to write your script on your own. Like my student did. She was already a seasoned writer when she did the feature film challenge, so she just went into writing her script after that. But she said, and I was so happy to hear this because she was a seasoned writer, that the challenge blew her away, that it really, really helped her get to a funny idea really quickly, which I'm so proud of. So the next thing in the order of events is my From SCHTICK to Script Original TV Comedy Pilot Writing Intensive, which this is my flagship writing program. It's a 5-week, 20-hour program designed to get you from premise to story structure and give you all the tools you need to write your pilot on your own. So what I mean by that is not only am I doing the lectures, which by the way, I'm going to pre-record this session. I'm going to drop one every single week in a learning platform called Thinkific, and everyone will have access to it for a year. But every Sunday, I'm going to drop a new lesson. I like everyone to be at the same stage of writing, which is why I'm dripping it out like that. But every week, in our private Facebook group, I will do a 1 hour or longer, if needed, live Q&A with my writers. So if you have questions about the first week premise thing, I will go through it with you live. And it's always been that Facebook group has always been great for peer support for other people in your class, because I keep it going. Even when people go into writer's room and they're doing an advanced stage with me, everyone stays in that group, and people still bounce ideas off each other long after the 5 weeks. From SCHTICK to Script is Sunday, January 10th to February 7th. I'm dropping the recordings every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. EST. Another very long registration link. I'm going to have to get customized URLs because these are really super long, but I will email these to you. Past years, so many people wanted to do writer's room that I've run 2 classes simultaneously. So one on a Saturday, one on a Sunday. But right now I've only got one class of 8, only up to, and I say 8 projects because sometimes people choose to team up and become a writing team in my class, and they can work together as one project in writer's room. It goes by project. What happens in online TV writers room, up to 8 people. It's a 4-hour class. We meet live in this case, Sunday from noon to 4 EST. It's another $397 US plus tax in Canada, which is still a bargain because my rate to do what I do in that room with you guys live in person as a Writers Guild member is a lot higher. So what I do in this room is the 8 projects that get selected, we each get equal time. We go around the room, and and it's 5 weeks again. And every day in those 5 weeks, people present what they want to present, whether it's, their outline, whether it's some scene work that they want to read out loud, or whether it's a writing problem that they're struggling with, or sometimes people come in with a full vomit pass. That's rare, but it happens sometimes in the first week. And so it's usually 20 minutes to half hour, depending on how many people are in class. And in your time slot, you are the showrunner of your show, and everyone else in the writer's room acts as your writer's room. And we give you, it's part of this is not only script development, but it is constructive criticism and feedback and yes-anding and making and you wouldn't believe the progress people make in writer's room. I'm really, really proud of how funny people can get in writer's room. So by the end of the 5 weeks, some people will have a vomit pass by then, some people won't, but the writers get an additional month to write that first or second draft of their script, and then they submit it to me for full notes a month later. Again, a lot less than what I would make in real life. All right, let's go to live Q&A. I did well. We have 21 minutes left. Okay, let's see if there is if there are any questions. I'm fine. Okay. The crown shout out was the last question. Does anyone have any questions? I know I went really fast and I told you a lot in one go. You can either say it out loud or type it in chat. This is super great. Do you run your courses later in the year? Yes, Claire. So yes, this is the first time I'm pre-recording them, meaning like normally I deliver them live. So because I work on set, I didn't even mention, I do a course called Punch It Up. So I do a course called Punch It Up, which is going to happen later in spring. And people have finished scripts and we do joke gyms and punch up gyms and we punch up each other's scripts and we just do random joke gyms. Like we do all different styles of writing jokes. That was an experiment I did last year, which ended up being the most fun. The problem with me, that has to be taught live because it's live joke gyms, right? So the problem, the problem with my life is that I work around the world as a script supervisor. So my next gig is supposed to be in Atlanta in March. I'm highly skeptical that it's going to happen. It's a big Robert De Niro picture and I'm super excited about it, but I have a feeling that it's going to be pushed. So this pre-recorded version of From Shtick to Script is going to be available all year long after that. And I have to make sure that I can still schedule in the weekly live Q&As. So yes, that program will become evergreen. I will be doing the same with my feature film courses. Again, I think I'm going to do the feature film version of these in late February, but I haven't decided yet. And it's the same idea. I will pre-record them and they'll eventually become evergreen that you can take it at any time. But Punch It Up has to be live. So I have to really find out what my schedule is on set. By the way, this is the year that I think I've made such big strides in my writing career this year that this is the year that I'll probably be writing full time, but I really do want to do this De Niro picture. One of my best friends is directing. All right. Ada, for length of episodes, are there any specific rules we need to stick to? Is 30 minutes standard or we can do more or less with this and get away with it? Well, very good question. If you're writing for a network, so you usually have a network in mind or a few networks in mind that you want to pitch to. If you're writing for streaming services, the scripts can be a lot heavier depending on your tone, heavier meaning longer, depending on the tone of your show. For example, The Office. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention this, but everyone who registers from Shtick to Script gets access to a database of like 100 pilot scripts and there's probably more in there by now. I keep feeding into that database and you can see the industry standard lengths. It varies by show, but on shows like The Office, they would shoot 42 pages and cut in the editing room what jokes didn't work. Most of my students, I tell them to aim for the 30 to 36 page range. You want to be a little heavier. We shoot more than what ends up in the final show so that you can, usually 42 is a bit extreme, but you know, if you watch like Russian Doll or some of the network streaming shows, they're longer because they fill up a whole 30 minutes, whereas network shows, you want to end up at 22 and a half minutes. So it really, the answer is it depends, but you want to have an idea which you're writing for, and then you want to have a rationale if it is longer when you go to sell it. Oh, it's 44 pages because it goes really fast. There's like a pace to this, or you know, whatever the case may be. But generally 30 to 36 pages is a good range for a half hour. Okay. Sorry, I think I skipped some questions. Also, what do you mean by getting coverage? Oh, so getting coverage is when you get script feedback from an objective professional who doesn't know you. Their job is to read scripts and give feedback on the scripts. By the way, not all coverage people are created equal. I have this hilarious example that I'm going to show you guys in class. I got 2 different bits of coverage from the same company for the same script. And one of the bits of coverage was so ridiculous that I complained and I went, this person doesn't understand feature film structure. I could tell by the notes that they gave me, and they gave me a more senior coverage person. They agreed with me that the coverage was awful. And I got a completely different bit of coverage. So the first one, they gave us 43% and the other person gave us 97% and said we made her cry. So it's very, very interesting. Not all coverage is created equal, but it is somewhat useful. It was still useful even to get that crazy coverage. Is like, what? They want us to make a completely different movie? It's always going to be subjective, but it is useful. It is useful to hear what an objective party thinks about your script. Any tips for an unknown writer to get noticed during COVID times? Can you get into rooms without an agent? You probably can't get into rooms without an agent unless you sell something like my students who are unknown writers, both of them, unknown writers, first-time writers, sold scripts. They're going to get into rooms. They're probably not going to be the senior writers, probably not at all, but they're going to get into the rooms as part of their deals. At least that's what they're both negotiating. So I would say that is your best bet. That's why content is king. Content is king. Create your own. I would say, probably one of the strongest ways. The other way is to win a major contest, because then you would get an agent from winning that major content, and then you would get into rooms. At least you would get read, right? Contests are a long shot, but it's like, literally, this is so exciting. Because we're so high up in final draft big break, what did we hit? We hit semifinals. Once we hit the next two stages, it's possible if we hit finals, and definitely if we were in the top whatever, we're going to get read by LA. And in We Screenplay Diversity, we're at finalist stage already, and they're priming us to get ready to meet agents in LA. So contests are like, they're random, but that can be another great avenue for first-time writers. Otherwise, I would just say keep writing. And then once you get your body of work to a critical mass, literally some of my students got agents with one script, but you have to have other ideas too. When the agent is asking you, what else have you got coming up? You have to be able to present that you're not a one-trick pony. You've got other ideas. Emily. Oh, hi, Emily. Once you're happy with your pilot script and you have a series Bible. Oh yeah, I didn't even talk about the series Bible. That is the 6th step. By the way, that is a talk that I get requested. People request. I have been a pitch coach for different contests, and I have created Bibles that have gotten attention. So I will do that as a bonus talk for the From SCHTICK to Script group, because that's a whole art in and of itself. I didn't include that in this talk because it's not really part of the writing, but it's a huge part. Selling it is a huge part of the equation. So what's the next step to getting it made? What advice do you have in terms of who to pitch to? Well, okay, Emily, you might have some you might be like me, because we're script supervisors. We actually have the ear of major producers and executive producers and directors. So you might either attach and cast. So you might want to, you might attach cast, or more likely a producer, to your script. So, but you want to find someone who's copacetic to what you're doing. So if you're doing a family comedy like my student did, and he knew what producer in LA might be more interested in a Jewish family comedy, and he pitched to him. It might end up being more random than that, but you can be very deliberate about, okay, these are the companies that are doing what I'm doing. These are the producers. And in your case, Emily, when you get out on the floor more as a script supervisor, these are I've had really big producers read my script. They haven't bought it because I know, I tell them, I know you do completely different work. I had the producer of Memoirs of a Geisha read my comedy script. I knew she wasn't going to make it, but she was going to be able to give me some advice, right? Because she works on that level. So yeah, you have more access, and anyone in here in the industry who's a director, or they might not be a writer, they might be a director, they might have a position where they interact with showrunners every day. That might be another way in. It's not highly recommended to use your job to get to it. Just happens organically very often. I know that for a fact when I go to LA, I am able to get pitch meetings without a problem, without an agent, because I'll just call up a producer I know and say, can I practice my pitch skills? Can I pitch you my show? And that's really fun. So, but if you don't have that luxury, of course, you're going to want to get an agent. So an agent or a manager. In Canada, we have both. They serve the same function. In the States, it's two different people. I know Canadians with managers in the US who don't yet have agents in the US. Usually the manager comes first. But yes. Do you provide direction with regards to where and who to submit scripts to? Only to the extent that I know about, because I don't really, most of my world is LA, is Hollywood. As a script supervisor, I work with Hollywood producers. So I ironically don't know as many Canadian producers. I do know some. I can give you some general guidance, but it's usually, it's not hard research to do. There's going to be certain shows you like. There's going to be certain, tone and comedic styles that you gravitate to. And by the way, a lot of people end up not writing comedies in my class. That's also fine. Some people end up writing 1 hours, or they write dramedies, and that's also fine. It just ends up being what happens as you make discoveries about yourself as a writer. What does the score mean, 43% versus 97%? Do you take that score to production companies when pitching? Not really. It's more so the score is based on all different factors, which they break down in the coverage. So they'll talk about plot, character work, general idea, overall impression, the voice. Is it an original voice? There's all these different factors, and they'll come up with a score. Every coverage company has sort of their own slightly different system, but the score sort of tells you where it lands in the eye of the beholder. And I haven't taken the score to production companies. What we've done is we've created a lookbook for our feature, and we've taken some of the quotes from some of the coverage, because some of the quotes have been like pretty amazing. So we've pulled some, so just to entice people to read it. So we put it in our lookbook, but it's not really, you might put it in an email, in a query letter as like, hey, this top festival said this about the script. Someone said get into rooms. So what they mean by that, John, is working in a writer's room. So some people write scripts, sell them, and walk away. Many people want a career as a writer, so they want to get staffed in a writing room. And you really only do that, can only do that with an agent. I mean, unless you sell an original show and manage to get on it, you really need an agent. The spots are limited in Canada, and some of you are here from Australia. They're still limited in Australia. US has more job opportunities, but you still need an agent or a manager at least. Roblin says, my writing partner and I whoops, it's scrolling, so I'm missing the question. Hold on. My writing partner and I are starting a new TV comedy script in January based on his experience. I was going to work on that if I took the course, but probably need to find something more personal to me in this case. Well, you're writing it together and it's personal to him. That's totally okay. I mean, you could apply what you learn to anything. Like basically the From SCHTICK to Script on its own without Writer's Room is putting all the tools in your hands and giving you a process to write whatever you want in future, right? Like just based on that process and just giving you, it's just an approach. And it's basically it's like all the things that you want to look for when you're to get your script to an industry, a professional level as possible, even if it's your first script. That's always what I go for. So you can write whatever you want in that From SCHTICK to Script. You're not actually handing in the full script. That's for Writer's Room. So I think you can do whatever you want, but whatever you want to, submit to me in that class, you can submit everything up to your structure. So whether your structure is an outline, a treatment, a beat sheet, any of that, index cards, it doesn't matter to me, because what happens with some people is they don't draw directly from their life. Something in their life inspires them. So if you look at Russian Doll, she obviously has not died a million times in her life. Natasha Lyonne, as a human being, has endured, drug abuse and serious crippling mental health issues. And I'm sure she feels like she should have died 1,000 times, right? And I'm sure that something like that extreme experience and that just being so close to death so many times in her life surely made that a personal film for her. It's not, or sorry, TV series for her. It's not literal, and yet it's literal. Yet, like, she was the perfect person to write that. Now it says she co-wrote it with Amy Poehler, but I think there's a lot of her in that. Sammy, speaking of script scores, what are your thoughts on the blacklist for television pilots? Okay, so I think the blacklist has changed. So the blacklist, for those who don't know, used to be this list that the industry would put up based on coverage scores, based on contest wins, a lot of other things, of the top scripts in every genre. Now you can pay to be on the blacklist. And I think once they made it a paid service, I mean, it's probably always useful to have your script either on the blacklist or on Coverfly's red list, which is the new one. So Coverfly's red list is literally based on coverage and contest scores. And once you get a certain number of points, you get on the red list. I'm like within 50 points of getting on the red list with this script. And that's only because they have not yet acknowledged I'm currently best screenplay and best fresh voice at Toronto Female Eye. Once they acknowledge Toronto Female Eye Festival as one of the competitions they acknowledge, I'll be way over the line for the red list. Once you're on the red list, industry starts to read your scripts. They want to read the very best scripts, right? So I think getting on the blacklist or the red list, whatever way that you have to get on it, is probably useful. It just doesn't have the same cachet as it used to, because it's not necessarily, like, I almost think the red list is better because it is at least based on contest and coverage, whereas the blacklist you can pay. Marie Barliso, I am a playwright and wrote my first TV sitcom pilot. Oh, great. With pilot and a mid-cut, like a mid-season episode inspired by my life. I am pitching my show for LA company. What advice would you give me? So if you've never pitched before, It's a conversation. So don't try to be too rehearsed there's people who do like really rehearse. I like dog and pony shows. Like Annie and I, when we were first pitching to all the networks, our show about Nikki, we realized we were way too rehearsed. It's really a lot better when it's a conversation. Obviously, you're going to want to know the core of your story, your characters, want, need, flaw, symptoms of flaw. You won't put it in those terms because a lot of development executives don't work that way, but you really want to be able to explain your character succinctly. You want to have a really strong adjective for who your main character is and the what's it about of your show. You really want to be able to have those things at the tip of your tongue. Your log, by then you will have a log line, not just a premise statement, but like a fully structured log line. And have fun. Some people do visual aids, which is totally fine. Have a one sheet that you can leave behind which you probably have. Like you have your Bible anyway. Sometimes most companies now will request some sort of Bible and a pilot script. If you're an unknown writer, that's usually what they will ask for if they're interested. So sounds like you have that. I always have a one sheet as well. So the one sheet just has like your log line for the series, and then your description of the series in sort of a longer paragraph, which includes all your major characters, of course, sometimes some visuals on it, your contact info, and a little bit of like where your series is going. And if it's like a special world, something about the world of the show. It usually fits on one page. That's why it's called a one page. Congratulations, by the way, Marie, that's wonderful. Emily, is it useful, typical for writers to use Coverfly, Script Pipeline, Roadmap Writers as resources to get started? Yes, I would say so. Are there other sites you would recommend? So I was using Film Freeway, but they've kind of died. I think Coverfly is there's also Movie Bites, BYTS. John P. Bible. John, you're hilarious. In the room, Bible. That's okay. I understand. Some of my students are like, sometimes you're talking too much industry lingo. I get it. So a Bible is like, depending, some people want 3 to 7 pages. Sometimes it's longer, summation of your TV series. And what my full Bible for my show is we'll have sort of the one page at the front. So the log line, the longer paragraph of what the show is. I'll have on the next page character descriptions for every single character in the show. I will have something about the world or the tone. If there's any comparables, like if there's a show that it's similar to in tone, it does help the reader understand what you're going for. What else goes into my Bible? Oh, I will literally beat out episodes for the whole season. I personally do that. Not every writer does that. I've helped other writers do that. It's really fun. By the way, they're not going to necessarily keep all your stories, but you want to show, look, I've got a season's worth of story ideas, and here they are. And you do them in succinct paragraph, ABC stories for each one. Depending on if your show has ABC stories, you would have a sentence, or it's short paragraphs for each one. Something about the writing team, if it's a team, or the writer, if it's one person, and if there's anyone else attached, put it in that Bible. Am I missing anything? I think I'm going to do that special adjunct bonus material, prepping your Bible. There's really good courses online already for that. There's like a $49 US course on Stage 32 about how to create a show Bible if you're interested. What about Screencraft? I love Screencraft. I am a Screencraft comedy finalist this year, and I have mad respect for Screencraft. They have, that's a comedy contest for those who don't know what we're talking about. I guess they have a website too. I'm not so familiar with it. I really respect them as a contest, though. I think they make good choices. Just as good as Coverfly, etc. Yes. Screencraft, Coverfly, Film Freeway was good. I just think they've just died down a lot. Movie Bites, BYTS. If anyone else has any that they like, posted in the chat. I think they use different name for a Bible in the UK, and I've forgotten. Oh, John, you're in the UK. Ada, do you know what they use in the UK? I know Ada's a script supervisor, not a writer, but maybe you are a writer, Ada, and I just don't know that about you. But no clue. Sorry. Okay. I've never heard another name for the Bible, actually. You just might become one. Nice. It's fun. I kept writing like for years when I was even in the throes of my very insane script supervision career. I kept writing the whole time. So there's one more minute. I'll stay longer if there's more questions, but I do have another meeting in half an hour, so I can't say too much longer. But oh yeah, you wanted me to repost the link. Okay, I'll do that. Actually, what I'll do is I'll copy and paste the link. Oh, thanks, Roblyn. I love doing these talks. I do all kinds of different talks on specific subjects. I've never done this one, and I realized this is a good one to start the year off with. Here's the from. Okay, I'm going to copy and paste the From Shtick to Script link in. This has been great. Oh, what's in demand? Comedies about millennials, boomers. I'm the worst person to ask about what's in demand. And frankly, I don't think you should write to what's in demand. I think, thank you, Mark. I think you should write to what is personal to you, because that's always in demand. How's that? How's that for an answer? There's the link for From Shtick to Script. When is the deadline to sign up for the personal premise challenge? Oh, you can sign up to the second day of the challenge. I have a refund policy if you're not absolutely satisfied by the challenge. To get a refund by the end of day 2, I would say register by the end of day 2. Because it's only half an hour a day, if you register on the Tuesday, you'll still be able to catch up with all the work that's needed by the Friday. And I say all the work, it's not that much work, actually. Yeah, and I'll email you guys with these links too. There's probably like another 80 people who are going to watch this in replay. All right, everyone. Oh, thank you, Elaine. Thank you for all your beautiful comments. I love teaching comedy. There's like been no greater joy for me. I'm telling you. And Ada, I know I say that to my script supervisors. It's different. With my script supervisors, I'm giving them a 6-figure lifeline. With comics, it's different. It's like we put so much of our lives into this, right? Thank you, everyone. You'll also get the replay, even though you're here live. Thank you for taking your time on a Sunday, and Happy New Year. Have a great writing year.